Okay, good evening and thanks for joining us. Welcome everybody to our weekly AJA Zoom event, and welcome to any new people that might be watching us for the first time. We also have people watching on Facebook and some who listen to the audio replay, which is broadcast every Thursday at midday and Sundays at 4 p.m. on J-Air Community Radio. That's at FM 88 in Melbourne or at j-air.com.au everywhere else. So welcome to you all. My name is Alan Friedman. I'm Vice President of the Australian Jewish Association, and also visible on your screen is David Adler, President of the AJA, and our guest for tonight, Joseph Gutnik, who I will introduce in a moment. The format will be pretty much as we usually do. We're going to have an interview discussion with Joseph, and then we're going to take questions from the audience. That will happen at about halfway through. If you do want to ask a question, what we ask you to do is raise your hand electronically. And the way to do that is click on the reactions icon at the bottom of the screen. And if you do that, you'll see that there's a little hand image and you can click on that. That lets us know that you want to ask a question and we put you in the line to do so. If you want to write or put a written question up, you can do that on the chat function, and Robert Gregory, our Director of Public Affairs, will read some of them out during question time. Okay, so to the general public, Joseph Gutnik is known as a high-profile businessman, mining industry entrepreneur, and the former president of the Melbourne Football Club. That's the AFL for you people in Sydney. To the Chabad community, he's known as a rabbi, benefactor, and the Lubavitcher Rebbe's special emissary for the integrity of the land in Israel. In fact, at Chabad centres right around the world, you will often see a plaque acknowledging the generosity of Joseph and his wife, Stera. Less well known to most is his involvement over many years in Israeli politics and his behind-the-scenes advocacy for Likud and his close association with Benjamin Netanyahu. This audience, I'm sure, will be well pleased about Bibi's return to power, and although Joseph keeps a very low profile these days, we're delighted he has agreed to speak with us tonight. Joseph, thanks for joining us and thanks for your time.
My pleasure.
Joseph, just before we get into the politics of Israel, business-wise, you're spending quite a lot of time in Tasmania these days. Can you just tell us what you're doing there?
Oh, well, I'm in the mining industry, of course, and I'm fortunate enough to be involved with a critical mineral deposit, a fluorspar, lithium, magnetite, quite a world-class deposit, and we are finishing a feasibility study and we're going to build a plant, and it's something which is very important for Australia and very important for the world.
Okay. Very good. Okay, so let's get into tachlis, as they say, and I'll just start with a question about the Lubavitcher Rebbe, because first and foremost he was a religious leader, but he also had views on Israel. So can you tell us what he said and wrote about this?
Well, the Rebbe talked for more than 40 years non-stop on the importance of the Israeli government not compromising with their enemies and not giving away any land, and especially not the creation of a Palestinian state, because that would endanger the lives of all the Jews living in Israel, everybody living in Israel, not only Jews, and also Jews all around the world. So he was quite adamant, no compromise, no Palestinian state.
So, I mean, he never visited Israel, did he?
No.
Okay, and was that intentional, do you think? Why would that have happened?
Well, you'd have to ask him. He had he had his reasons, but he certainly, there is over 1,000 Chabad houses in Israel. We have settlements in Israel, one in Kfar Chabad, one at Nachlat HaChabad, and the Rebbe was very adamant about these settlements. It's not settlements, they're cities there in towns in Israel, and the Rebbe encouraged lots of people to settle in Israel, and the Rebbe was very involved with the education of Jews in Israel, so he was totally involved even though he never visited.
Okay, all right, let's talk about Israeli politics. So I'm just interested, when did you first become interested in Israeli politics and in Likud?
Well, I first got officially involved when the Rebbe appointed me to visit Israel, to lobby in the time of Yitzhak Shamir, Prime Minister Shamir, in 1990. And I've been involved since then. And I've been very much involved with Likud from 1990 till today.
And when did Likud actually start? Would it have been around that time, or what, 10 years earlier?
No, when the time of Menachem Begin, so it started a lot earlier.
Yes. Okay, so you're obviously very happy with the result of the current election. Tell us about your newspaper ads, and I'm going to ask David, we'll put up a couple of these ads. So just tell people why you decided to put some newspaper ads in the newspapers, and where did they appear?
Well, it's not the first time that I've put ads in newspapers. I've been doing it since 1990, and all these newspaper ads I'm sort of proposing and explaining to people the importance of a right-wing government, the importance of no Palestinian state, supporting those people that are pro the settlements, pro right-wing government, pro no Palestinian state. So I've been advertising and I've been creating clips and all types of lobbying since 1990. Sometimes.
Okay, so we've just had a glimpse of them. David, perhaps put the first one up again. That's the one in Hebrew. And I just want to ask Joseph what it says for our audience who will mostly be non-Hebrew speaking.
There's English ones as well. You can
well, we'll get to those. So just tell us what's going on here, Joseph.
Well, I've got it in front of me. So here we've got choose. This went onto all newspapers in Israel: Haaretz, Yediot, Jerusalem Post, Haaretz in English, Yediot Ahronot, Ma'ariv. It says here, choose in life. That I was encouraging people to vote, not to remain indifferent. And the main reasons were to B'chaim shel bitachon, we should have proper defense of Israel. B'chaim shel Masoret, we should follow the traditions of the Jewish people and have a Jewish state. And talking about unity, that we should all be united for one cause, for a strong Israel.
So really, this first one, you're actually encouraging people to get out and vote. Does it actually mention Likud anywhere there?
No, I was saying I'm not a particularly a Likudnik. I'm close to Likud, but I supported all those people on the right, all the parties on the right, starting from the Yadut HaTorah to Ben Gvir to Smotrich, and of course the main party is the Likud. So all those that stand for these principles, that was what the Lubavitcher Rebbe wanted, a right-wing government, and these are the people I supported.
Okay, David, let's put up number 2 again. So this is in English. So where would this have appeared? Would this be the Jerusalem Post?
This is it's written up there, Haaretz.
Okay. So you actually advertised in Haaretz?
Yes. No discrimination. They should all be able to earn some money. So Haaretz and Jerusalem Post, those are the two main newspapers in English.
Okay. Was Haaretz surprised to get an approach from you to put such an ad in?
No, they're used to me already putting ads in.
Okay. All right, David, let's put up number 3. Okay, so are these videos, Joe?
They're clips. You can, if anyone wants to have a look at them, you can see it on YouTube.
Okay, and what are they, just like little commercials?
They're not commercials. They're lobbying for, as it says there, unity for all Jews, security. We can't afford to stay home, encouraging people to vote. It's most important that everyone votes. And of course, I was wanting those to vote for the right wing should not be indifferent. And there's been so many elections, so you have to encourage people to vote, and that was the main purpose of it. The importance of voting to stop a Palestinian state, to make sure that there's unity amongst the Jewish people, and make sure there's a Jewish state.
Yeah, just before you take that away, David, I'm looking at the screen on the bottom left-hand side, the one that says security, and you've actually written something or you've written it in a way which I think is very important, and you're advocating not to give away land. And what we hear is that people often talk about giving back land, and I always correct them, because we're not giving back land at all, but we don't want to give away land, do we?
Because it's our land. That's
right. So that's just one of those little areas of terminology which I think people can bear in mind. And if you're ever talking to people and they talk about giving land back, then that needs to be corrected. Let's just have a look at the final one.
I'd like to just make a comment on that. Yeah. Mike Pompeo, who was the Secretary of State and is now probably going to stand as president, he has recently said that the Yehuda v'Shamron, Judea and Samaria, that belongs to the Jewish people. He's an evangelical Christian.
Yes.
And he said peace shouldn't be made on lines. It should be peace between the Arab people and the Palestinians and Israel and the Jewish people. And there's no lands, because according to his belief and what he thinks is correct, that the Judea and Samaria belongs to the Jewish people.
Okay, absolutely.
He said that a few days ago.
Yes. Okay, good. Let's just go to that final slide. So this looks like it was on the COL website, is that right?
But it was on all websites. It was on COL, it was Ynet, it was on YouTube. We had 1.5 million hits.
Wow. Okay. So can you gauge roughly the response to all of these ads?
Well, of course, I didn't get any criticism from anybody. I'm sure that some of the people on the other side of politics weren't happy with it, but they can't do anything about it, because according to Israeli law, as long as you put your name down and you're not associated with a party, then you're allowed to advertise as much as you want.
And do you consider this was money well spent?
Well, the was 2,000 votes that made the difference between a right-wing government and a left-wing government. So I hope I had a small contribution towards that.
Okay, yeah, I hope so too. Okay, so as far as you know, was there any sort of major pushback in terms of the ads?
Well, I just got, the people I mixed with were just full of praise, but I don't know what other people thought, but it's a democratic country, so I'm allowed to advertise whatever I want. And once upon a time, when you were living outside of Israel, you were criticized if you intervene in the internal affairs of Israel. But today, everyone seems to be intervening, so I'm no longer a black sheep anymore, because everyone's intervening.
Okay, so let's talk about Bibi Netanyahu. When did you first meet him, and what did you see in him at the time?
First of all, I'd like to make a statement that I'm not a disciple of Bibi Netanyahu. I support the Likud's right-wing policies, and Bibi has been the leader for all these years, so I support him. I am personally a very good friend of his. When he came to Australia, when he wasn't Prime Minister, he stayed at our home. So we have a very close relationship, our family with his family. And I see in him a great person who's able to walk within the raindrops and maneuver. And he's great in Hasbara. He's great in explaining to the non-Jewish world and to the United States all about the importance of the state of Israel and its defense. Not everything he says do I agree with, but he's been a great leader, and he's represented the Jewish people very well. I don't think anyone disputes that. No. And I mean, now that when he's Prime Minister, so I guess previously and now, do you have the opportunity to speak with him from time to time? Well, I visit him very often and visit him at his home, so I've got a very close relationship with him.
Right. Okay. And do you think he's changed over the decades in any way?
No. The same Bibi of 1990 is the same Bibi in 2023.
Right. Okay. His views are exactly the same. He hasn't changed them at all, which is good.
As I say, I don't necessarily agree with all his views because the Rebbe was very much against the Palestinian state, and he talks about a demilitarized Palestinian states, which we can talk about later if you want to, but
yes.
That's something that I strongly disagree with him about.
So what about the Oslo Accords? So is that something that you would have not entered into?
Correct.
Okay. And the government of Israel obviously did at the time. I guess it's been shown that it wasn't a great plan. Is that the way you would see it?
Well, as I said, I was close with Prime Minister Shamir, close with Arik Sharon. I was close with all the right-wing prime ministers. And what can I say? The Oslo Accords were not something that were very successful, and certainly not the disengagement that took place.
Absolutely. So in terms of the current government, you mentioned Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich. Have you met them? What's your view of these two guys?
Well, I know them very well, both of them, more Ben-Gvir than Smotrich. I think they're very reasonable people. They can be, from time to time, a bit too extreme, but it depends what you define as extreme. Their views are solid, but sometimes they may, Ben-Gvir may go beyond outside the box, but his views are strong. He's out to protect Jews in Jerusalem and around Israel against the terrorists, and that's his main goal, and that's extremely important at the present moment.
And I mean, of the other politicians, who could you say are some of the rising stars in Israeli politics?
Well, I have no doubt but to mention Yariv Levin, the present Minister of Justice, Nir Barak, who was the mayor of Jerusalem, is now the Minister of Kalkala. So there are some real shining lights in the Likud in the future.
Right.
I'm also a great supporter of Ayelet Shaked, and hopefully she will return to the Likud and play an important part in the Likud.
Yes, I was going to ask you about some of these people. So she was a bit of a loss. She was a loss in the recent election. So is her plan to come back into politics, do you think?
Definitely. She's coming to visit Australia in March.
Yes.
And so people will be able to see themselves what a special woman she is.
A potential prime minister?
Definitely.
Okay, very good. What about someone like Naftali Bennett? How do you see him in terms of the potential that he had and whether he realised that?
Well, you can imagine I'm not the greatest supporter of his, and I was not very happy what he left the right wing and joined with the Arab members of the Knesset. So he's not Mr. Popular in my book. He's a nice guy, but I don't think he should have done what he did.
And was that a function of the Israeli political system? So he didn't actually win many votes, did he? Yet he was the one that ended up prime minister, which was almost an impossible task, wasn't it?
Well, see, he had those number of seats that because of the Israeli government, sometimes it's so close to it was joining all the parties together. So he would have that deciding seats that could go either way. And he decided, for whatever his reasons were, to go with Yair Lapid. And we had a left-wing government, and wasn't, in my eyes, a very good government.
Okay, so let's turn to look at some of the current controversies. The reform of the judicial system. What's your view on that?
Well, I'm, as you can imagine, very pro the changes. Well, even years ago, Yair Lapid, who is now totally against it, you have videos of him saying there should be changes in the judicial system. You've got the president of Israel started saying at the moment He also says there should be changes. Now, you can argue what changes there should be and what changes there shouldn't be. Well, at the moment, Yair Lapid and the left are not even willing to talk about it. So we're not getting anywhere at the moment. I'm sure there's room for discussion and for compromise, but there's not going to be any compromises or discussion if people are not willing to talk. Yes.
Well, the opponents are just hostile, aren't they? I mean, Bibi keeps saying that he's prepared to be reasonable. Do we know what that means?
Well, I know I don't know exactly, Bibi's not, according to the law, that's supposed to mix in this whole situation, but I know from Yariv Levine, who is the driver of these judicial changes, he's prepared to speak, but he doesn't want preconditions. They want to talk and discuss and compromise, but no one's willing to talk to him because it's more a sore losers, like a soccer game in Europe. When you lose, you go berserk and not willing to talk, not willing to discuss, not willing to get anywhere. Yes. It's terrible what's happening in Israel. There's almost a civil war taking place.
The accusation is that the current system basically meant that the courts functioned like an arm of the government. Is that what happened?
Well, from my viewpoint, there's a number. The judicial system is mostly from the centre-left representatives. The right is not properly represented on the judiciary. Like from a religious point of view, there was always a law that chametz, unleavened bread, wasn't allowed to be put into the hospital, so the Supreme Court overruled it. Whenever it comes to matters in Judea and Samaria, you find the court overruling whatever the government says, and so on and so forth. It's a very much a secular left-wing judiciary and very unsympathetic to the right. And so what we're asking for is let's have proper representation and make sure it's more a neutral judiciary than one which is totally leaning to the left and overruling basic laws that have been histories right through in place right through since establishing the state of Israel.
I'm going to hand over to David in a moment. I just want to ask a couple of other questions. The Albanese government, what's your view?
Well, I think the Prime Minister wants to be neutral to pro-Israel, so I'm not particularly perturbed. Of course, I didn't like the idea of Israel Australia not wanting to make the Jerusalem recognised as the capital, but as long as Australia is fair and votes with Israel and the United States on most occasions, we should be happy with it. Traditionally, the Labor Party has been, starting from Bob Hawke, has been very pro-Israel.
Yes. So
hopefully that will continue.
Although we would say that lately they've probably taken a much more hostile view. What about? Do you actually engage?
I don't mix into Australian politics.
Okay, but Israeli politics are all right.
I leave it to Mark Liebler and company to deal with them.
Do you actually engage at all with Australian politicians?
Well, I used to a lot, but the last I used to be a supporter of Prime Minister Howard, Kim Beazley, Mark Latham. So I've been back and forth to Labor and Liberal, but lately, the last 10 years or so, I haven't been involved in Australian politics. So
Scott Morrison, would you have ever met him or had a chat with him on anything?
Not really.
Okay. Okay, David, I'll hand over to you and you can ask your couple of questions and then we'll throw it open to the audience.
Okay. Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Joseph, for joining us this evening. Firstly, I want to thank you for the advocacy that you've been involved in. I think it's very important. I would like to invite your comment on a domestic matter. Prior to the Israel election, during and shortly after, we've seen a number of Jewish leaders vehemently criticise some of the candidates, as well as the general formation of the government, we've actually taken the traditional view that it's not the role of an organisation in the diaspora to do that. You can comment on policy, but to actually get involved in advocating for or against the candidates is a different matter. Did you notice what was going on in Australia with regard to the commentary on the Israel election before and after?
Yeah, I'm very surprised, and I'm especially very surprised of the present criticism from different organisations against the Israeli government. Now, we should be supporting the Israeli government, and that was my view even when Prime Minister Rabin was in power and Prime Minister Barak was in power. You wouldn't have seen us coming out so critical of leaders in Israel as they are doing at the moment. I'm just bewildered that this is taking place.
I've you and I are lockstep on this, and I've seen some of their words picked up by the enemies of Israel, including by, for example, Quds news network, which is a propaganda arm of Hamas, have quoted some of our locals. I won't name names tonight, which I think is quite irresponsible.
We're giving ammunition to our enemies by talking that way.
Exactly. So I have a request. Next time you speak to Bibi, let him know that there is an organisation in Australia that actually has a principled support for Israel and the Israeli government of the day, and is not. We don't see it in our interests to throw mud at them. If we've got comments to make, we'll do it privately behind the scenes, but to do so in publicly, we think it's problematic.
Well, as I said beforehand, I was a supporter of Prime Minister Shamir, Prime Minister Netanyahu, but all those years when the others were in power, you didn't see us coming out and criticising the Israeli government and throwing mud on them like it's happening at the moment. It just, I can't believe that people in Australia can act in such a manner and give fodder to the Labor government here and to the Foreign Minister and to everyone else in Australia, just giving them ammunition against us. It's just staggering.
Yeah, well, there's also been a couple of front pages of the Australian Jewish News that fall into that category as well. There's only one other policy issue I want to ask you about concerning Israel. As an external interested observer, it seems that Israel is very good now at dealing with the external threats. There's probably no force in its immediate surrounds that can threaten it, but has a huge internal security problem. Some of the more extreme Arab groups, the terrorism that we've seen has had an uptick. What do you think should be done? What policies are under consideration that might help with that? It's quite distressing to observe.
Despite different people's opinions about Ben Gvir, we need someone like him, maybe a little bit more moderate in how he presents himself, to bring order into Israel and to eradicate these terrorists and make them fear by expelling them, knocking down their houses. That doesn't help much, taking away their citizenship. And these are the type of laws that Ben Gvir wants to enact. And I'm 100% behind him, but I'm not necessarily behind everything he does, but these type of actions that need to be taken, that's imperative. Otherwise, we're going to be living in fear in Israel.
Yeah. Okay, I can see there are quite a few questions, Alan, so...
Okay. Thanks, David. If you're listening on J-Air, this is the Australian Jewish Association Zoom event, which we have every Wednesday night. Our guest tonight is Joseph Gutnik, high-profile businessman and confidant of Bibi Netanyahu and others in Likud, or others in the right wing of Israeli politics. And we're talking Israeli politics. So I'm just going to hand over for a moment to David to tell us what's coming up next week, and then we'll open it up to the floor.
Okay, Alan, just briefly, anyone here who is not yet supporting AJA in some tangible way, once the event is finished, please go to the website jewishassociation.org.au. You can take membership. If you're not a member, make sure you're on the email list. And there is, of course, a donation facility there. Next week, we are looking at political security issues more broadly. And we have a good friend of ours, Senator James Patterson, who in the previous government chaired the Interparliamentary Security Committee, and he's now the Shadow Minister for countering foreign interference, China, Iran issues, etc. So we'll be talking about security issues between countries.
Okay, thanks, David. Okay, over to you. So I've got Andy, Terry, Rod and Dennis at this stage. If you do want to ask a question of Joseph, now's the time to put your hand up. So we're going to start with Andy, who's actually in Israel. So Andy, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you very much. Yes, I am in Israel, and I'm really upset when I'm seeing the protests around the country. Even modern Orthodox friends of mine are proudly wearing the Israeli flags. What I really want to know, and I really don't see this in the international media, is who's behind the protest. Is it actually Lapid? Is it actually he doing a Trump where he's happy that he was not reelected? Who's paying for those nice, expensive, large Israeli flags? And actually, I have not really seen a list of what the judicial changes are being recommended. We're hearing a lot of things, but the public doesn't know. And where is the press? Why aren't we being informed? Thank you.
What do you think, Joseph?
Oh, firstly, we have a lot of friends in quotation marks that would certainly financially support such activities against a right-wing government. So I don't think they're short of funds. And I do think that Yair Lapid is spearheading this whole campaign together with Lieberman and the others, not so much Benny Gantz. I know Benny, the previous defense minister, quite well. He's more moderate and he is a rational individual, and I don't think he's as extreme in his views as Yair Lapid is. And I do think there's plenty of people financing, not short of funds. In regards to Hasbara, in explanation in the press, I think it's at the moment extremely weak. And that's something that normally Bibi is extremely good at. And I saw just recently an article that had very little amount of money they could for explanations. That's something that you're 100% right. There's not even in Israel do they understand what's the changes in the judicial. There's no changes, and it's against democracy, but no one even knows what the changes are. And the changes are just quite simple in regards to the judiciary, is to get more representation from the other minorities in Israel, rather than the judges themselves voting themselves in and deciding. Like the United States of America, the Congress and the Senate decide who become the Supreme Justices, not the judges themselves. It's quite bizarre. The judges themselves should have the ability to choose themselves. This would be something which is fully represented by all different minorities and all different groups in Israel and fairly represented. And of course, the government of the day should have a majority on these committees to pick these the judges.
Yeah, well, the bottom line is the people elect the government to run the country, not the judges. So the judges really need to understand that.
But you need a Supreme Court. No one's against having a Supreme Court, but there's certain, they go beyond the norm in interfering with every single issue that appears in Israel, and they become the government, not the government.
Yeah. Terry, your turn. Please unmute yourself and fire away.
Hi. I share your enthusiasm for Bibi Netanyahu, but I'm just looking at the future. Israel has lots of elections at fairly short intervals. Do you think that Bibi's personality, I wouldn't describe it as narcissism, but I think you can see where I'm coming from, is going to block some of these newcomers from taking the front seat at a future election once he's given it away?
Unfortunately, that has happened in the past. All the good and upcoming individuals in the Likud have been pushed aside. Hopefully, I hope he's not listening, but hopefully he will be replaced in the next elections, and there'll be someone from the younger, he's been there long enough, that someone from the younger stars in the Likud, or there was someone like, I thought, Ayelet Shaked or Yariv Levin or Nir Barkat, some of these should come up and we should have some fresh spirit into the Israeli government. But someone's going to have to convince the Prime Minister that he should step aside.
Well, that never happens, does it? I mean, none of the leaders of the world ever volunteer to step down. So there's usually a bit of a bloodbath first. Okay, Rod Meyer, your turn. Please unmute yourself and ask.
Thank you. Hi, Joseph. I was wondering, you say that you wouldn't want to see some sort of deal with the Palestinians where land was involved and state created. What's your vision for what Israel would look like in the longer term in that case?
Well, no one has a magic wand to what the solution is, but I think the direction that the Israeli government has been going, both Yair Lapid and Prime Minister Netanyahu, was to make peace with the Arab states, and hopefully we can make peace with Saudi Arabia. And once we had peace with the Arab states, it'll fall in place some kind of a solution with the Palestinian Authority. But at the moment, I don't think most leaders in Israel think that the Palestinian Authority want peace. They just want us out of Israel into the sea.
And the AJA, Joseph, is probably unusual for a communal organisation, because we say that the two-state solution is just a failed option. It's been a failure for 100 years, and yet the whole world insists on talking about the two-state solution. Do you find that a bit weird?
Well, Secretary Pompeo just said yesterday that there's no such thing as a two-state solution because there's only one Israel, and we have to find a way of how to deal with the Palestinian community if they're willing to make peace with. They were offered everything against. Ehud Barak offered them everything. Olmert offered everything, even though I was dead against it, but they didn't accept it. They were going to get 95% of Israel. They don't want peace. They want the whole of Israel.
Well, yes, they were offered virtually the whole of Judea and Samaria. In hindsight, can we say perhaps we were actually a little bit pleased that they refused that, because now we can see what's really happening.
Of course, we're pleased. Imagine if having another Gaza, we pulled out of Gaza and it's become a terrorist haven. What would happen if we were pulled out, God forbid, of Yehuda and Samaria, and you'd have militant terrorists, Islamic terrorists living next door to us, and how would we control them? Just like we can't control Gaza, how are we going to control? And as a matter of fact, I asked that to our dear present Prime Minister Netanyahu, if there is a demilitarized state in a Palestinian state, how are you going to control the extremist militants coming to that state and causing us issues like in Gaza? He said he hasn't worked that out yet. That was his answer. My son and daughter were sitting there together with me. We saw him in Sydney when I asked him that question. He said he hasn't worked it out. I said, boy, so how can you promulgate such a view if you haven't worked out how you're going to contain the terrorists in a Palestinian state? Anyway, it's a big issue. How we will deal with a two-state solution and have in a Palestinian state Islamic terrorists there and coming into our territory and shooting missiles onto us would be an absolute disaster. And that's why the Rebbe was against the Palestinian state. He thought it endangered the whole state of Israel. And
in fact, I would add that I think the environment for that has deteriorated significantly. There's now been at least two generations of Arab kids who have grown up being taught nothing but hatred, have seen terrorists glorified as heroes, the pay for slay program, the propaganda, at a minimum, and I don't think that this would ever happen, but at a minimum, you don't need another 2 generations of reform to wash it through if they did a 180-degree turn tomorrow. So I think that even for those that thought it might have been viable 30, 40, 50 years ago, you've got to be shaking your heads. It would just be madness today.
Fully agree with you, 100%.
But Joseph, one of the things that seems to be forgotten with all this talk of a Palestinian state, Judea and Samaria is really the biblical, the historical heartland of the Jewish people. That's where everything happened. And yet we sort of are almost talking about giving this away. I mean, what would happen to all of that archaeological history if we did give it away?
Disaster. I'll give you an example. When we're talking about the disengagement, President Bush at the time would not have gone along with the disengagement because he was quite right-wing in his views. But if the Prime Minister, Sharon, comes to him and tells him, oh, we're willing to evict our Jews from our own land, well, why would he say no? The same thing today. If Jews all around the world and leaders are saying, yes, we need a 2-state solution, so why should the American administration say, no,
Yeah.
we don't want to, it's that we're our own best enemies.
Worst enemies.
I meant best enemies to say that.
Yeah. Okay, Dennis, your turn. You can unmute.
Rabbi,
No, you're right.
Rabbi, good evening, and thank you for your dissertation. I have a question with regard to the legal situation, and that is this. There are 2 issues as far as I see it. One is that the legal change re the appointment of judges. Now, it seems to me that Bibi Netanyahu could point to any other democracy in the Western world and say that governments appoint judges. The judges don't, in most other countries, do not appoint themselves or from their own cohort. This is true of the United States. It's true of many countries. It seems to me, and I wonder if you agree, that Bibi is doing a very bad job in terms of explaining this to the electorate at large.
I agree.
The
explanations are pathetic. That no one's hearing anything. As I mentioned earlier about the American Senate chooses who the judges are, not the judges themselves.
So is the Israeli government not really explaining what they're trying to do?
Well, that's what they're trying to explain it to the electorate, the left and the leaders, but no one wants to hear. They're not interested to hear. It's more against a personal attacking Bibi Netanyahu and against the religious. They don't want them to have any say in the state of Israel. So they've got a hatred to Bibi, and so no one wants to listen to anything. They're just against.
Okay, I have a second part of the question, and that is this. The other part of the change that Bibi wants to make, or that Likud wants to make, is that the government can overturn decisions of the judiciary. Now, this seems to me to be one step too far, because in no other Western democracy can the government overturn the judiciary. What they can do is they can change laws to circumvent what the judiciary decides, but they can't carte blanche in other countries overturn the decisions of the High Court. And so this seems to me to be an area where the left can make capital.
Well, that's a very good point. There's one difference. Israel doesn't have a constitution. The United States has a constitution, so the Supreme Court can't go and overrule the constitution. the problem with Israel is they have basic laws that they say that the Supreme Court in Israel can't overrule, but it's not exactly clear what these basic laws are and what the Constitution is. So that's what, again, we need explanations, we need understandings. What are the basic laws? And maybe Israel should have a basic constitution like the United States have, and then we won't have this problem of the Supreme Court overruling basic law. So you're 100% correct.
Joseph, in terms of the media in Israel, I think the Times of Israel seems to be about the best of them. Would you agree with that? Which media outlets do you follow?
Well, I follow everyone. I follow Ynet, I follow Haaretz. I want to hear everyone's opinions. But Arutz Sheva is probably that's the Channel 7. That's probably the most pro-right and less tainted with biases. Okay, good. Robert Gregory, our Director of Public Affairs, has got some written questions, I think, Robert. So what have you got there?
Yeah, so we've got some questions. Someone's asked, are you aware of the Hashemite Kingdom of Palestine solution emanating from Saudi Arabia in June 2022 that trashes the Palestinian state? What's your opinion of that, and have you discussed it with Bibi Netanyahu?
Well, I'm not exactly sure what that proposition was.
Yeah, so maybe.
No, okay. It was one of the ideas. Okay.
I'm sure if it came from Saudi Arabia, I'm sure it wasn't necessarily something that we would like. But there's been so many propositions put forward that are unacceptable that it's very hard to follow them all.
And I wanted to ask, how are you treated by the Jewish roof bodies? We know you've contributed a lot to Hebron and communities that maybe some of the roof bodies might have an issue with. So have you ever had any troubles with them?
In Israel,
in Australia, the Australian Jewish roof.
Well, not really. No one in the time. At one stage, we had Jabril Rajoub, who used to be in charge of Hebron, coming on ABC TV, criticizing me and say he's going to get me. But at that time, it was the Howard government, and who was the foreign minister then?
Alexander Downer.
Yeah, Alexander Downer called me and he says, "We'll protect you, and we are free to give money to Hebron, and the Australian government, we're not against you giving money to the settlements." So I've had support, and I haven't had anyone. I knew Bob Hawke very well. I haven't had anyone from Labor or Kim Beazley come in and tell me, "No, Joseph, don't give money to settlements." And support Hebron and other places. I haven't heard from any government body or any real bodies coming to me and saying, except the Palestinian pro-Palestinian people here, but not from any government bodies. No.
Anything else, Robert, or is that it from you?
I mean, I've had someone ask if the Israeli government can enact retrospective laws, and also a lighthearted question: how many times have you watched Melbourne win the grand final?
Well, I don't know. I've watched the video of some of the grand finals in 1964 and the 50s, but I was very fortunate in 2021 to be able to watch it on TV because it was in Perth. So that was one that I watched live.
Yeah, we all enjoyed that one. So Joseph, the Abraham Accords, do we think that with Bibi back in power that this might get a little bit of a nudge along?
Hope so. We hope so. But it's not the overall solution of the Palestinian issue in Israel. That's still a major issue. And hopefully the more peace that is made with Arab countries, the more reasonable the Palestinian Authority will become.
Yeah, and of course, the Trump administration was instrumental in facilitating all of that. It almost seems like the Biden administration, well, it's at the beginning, they didn't really want to say too much positive about the Abraham Accords because it was a Trump initiative. The Biden administration, well, what do you think? I mean, it seems rather problematic in some areas. What's your view of Joe Biden and his government?
Well, they're Democrats, and they've and starting from Obama onwards, they haven't been as pro-Israel as the Republicans. They're not as pro-Israel as the Republicans, but I just still think, I can't imagine that Joe Biden would do anything drastically bad to Israel, because he's been a supporter of Israel right through his career. So you have extremists like Sanders making ridiculous comments about we should be putting conditions on aid to Israel. We've got these left-wing Democrats that are putting a lot of pressure on Biden, but overall, I think both the Democrats and the Republicans are pro-Israel, and we just have to remain strong and say, yes, we are going to develop Yehuda Shomron and Judea and Samaria, and too bad for you.
Yeah. We watched the US diaspora with quite a lot of dismay, because they seem to be, their support of Israel seems to be dropping down their list of priorities. Do you have much to do with American Jewry?
Well, I just know from the Chabad representatives, Chabad has us all over America, and we get feedback of what's going on. There's a lot of assimilation in America. There's an indifference of a lot of people towards Israel. On the other hand, there's lots of people that support Israel. So it's a big Jewish population with different views and different opinions. And I still think American Jewry is still very pro-Israel and will remain that way.
And mainstream American Jews are by and large Democrat. Would the Chabad community be more Republican leaning?
Chabad community are apolitical.
Okay, but what do you think? From when you speak to people, would you get a sense that they're much more favourable to a Republican side?
The Chabad community, well, the Chabad community are very pro-Israel and pro the Rebbe's points of view. So the Republicans are more towards the views of the Rebbe than the Democrats. That's just a fact. So, but we don't. Chabad never comes out to support Democrats, support Republicans. The same in Israel. Chabad officially, I'm a representative of the Rebbe, but not of the Chabad movement. The Chabad movement should not get involved, not in Israeli politics and not in American politics. We're apolitical.
And they don't get involved in politics in either America or Israel?
They shouldn't.
Do they?
Well, I'm not. There's always pockets of rebellious people.
Okay, all right. Reuven, we'll hear from you, so please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yosef, there's talking about a pipeline from Saudi Arabia to Haifa and a goods train from Saudi Arabia to Haifa, port of Haifa via Jordan. Do you think that could be one of the reasons for this so-called temporary freeze on the construction in the 9 towns that meant to be the 9,000 units? I think that could be behind it.
I hope not. I hope that a pipeline is not a reason to expand the Judea and Samaria, because that's an integral part of the defense of Israel and protecting Israel. The more settlements we have there, the less chance of a two-state solution and a Palestinian state. So I hope something of that nature. It certainly wouldn't be public. What goes on behind the scenes, I don't know, but certainly let's hope that that's not the reason.
You've used a word that there's a few words that I really struggle with. I don't like using them. So terms like occupation, apartheid, and even settlements. To me, they're loaded against Israel. Do you think that Israel has done enough to combat the Palestinian narrative?
Of course not. Our hasbara, as they call it, our explanations is very poor in Australia, in the United States, all around the world, presenting the pro view of settling Judea and Samaria. So it's not enough money. There's lots of money going on to the other direction, but not in our direction. So hopefully that's something that will change in years to come.
Yeah, and yes, I just want to also, I sort of make a point of not using the word settlements. I mean, it's got a biblical origin because, you know, our forefathers settled the land, and I think that's where it comes from.
there's two words, hitnachliyut and hityashvut. One means like, one is settling, another one is settlers. It's two words, but I don't care what words we use, terminology you use. Haifa was established by settlers, Tel Aviv was established by settlers, and Chalutzim, and the same thing is happening in Yehuda v'Shamron. Judea and Samaria and Tel Aviv are the same Israel, the same Hityashvut there, same Hitnachlut. Doesn't matter what words you use. I like the word settlements because we're very clear in what we're doing. We're trying to resettle our land.
Yeah, but it does have, they've turned it into a negative connotation, haven't they?
Unfortunately.
Yeah. So somehow we've got to find a way, if we want to use that word, we need to make it very clear that it's not a negative description.
Well, that's what we have to, that's what we have to explain.
Yes.
It's not negative. Settling is not negative.
Yes, exactly. A couple of quick questions. Hugh is probably in the UK, so please unmute and ask your question, Hugh.
Yes, I've recently done 2 filming trips to Israel, and one of the things that I'm really concerned about is the Palestinian takeover of Area C of Judea and Samaria, which is being financed largely by the European Union. Sadly, the Israeli government haven't done a lot to combat this. This has been going on for over a decade. What do you think needs to happen?
We need to put the Minister of Finance, Smotrich, in charge of the Judea and Samaria and the civil rights that are there and stop that. It's outrageous that the European Union is supporting the Arabs and they are building houses on areas where they're not allowed to build and nothing's done about it. Hopefully this present right-wing government, as long as Bibi allows it to happen, will allow now that we should be able to build, and the Arabs can only build if they get permission, not build in places where they haven't got permission.
Does Bibi have quite a lot of power within the government, or is he fighting opposition from multiple corners?
Well, Bibi has a lot of power because the majority of the Likud voters are supportive of Bibi, just like with President Trump, you have the rank and file that are behind him. So it's the same thing as Bibi. But Bibi now has to deal with a coalition that includes the Smotrich and Ben-Gvir. So he has to be on the watch because he can't get away with things that he got away with in the past.
And did you say that Lieberman was part of the opposition protest in terms of all of this?
Definitely.
Because he was quite a right-wing politician, wasn't he?
Yeah, but the hatred that he has to Bibi and others have to Bibi overrides all other considerations.
So what would he actually want? I mean, he wouldn't want left-wing policy, surely.
He just wants Bibi out.
Okay. We've got time for a last question. Dina Razel, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you. I'm wondering about the difficulty for expressing Hasbara when so much of the media is left-wing and just won't pick it up, both within Israel and without. Can you comment on that?
Well, you're 100% correct, and it's a big problem. How we're going to overcome the fact that all the newspapers in Israel, except for 1 or 2, even the Jerusalem Post now is more to the left. So it's very, very difficult, and somehow we have to work hard to try and change that.
Yeah, and it's the same here, of course, isn't it? The media is very much against Israel. What about something like the ABC? Does that ever cross your radar at all?
It crosses my radar, all right, but it's not pro. It's not pro-Israel.
No,
I think everyone would agree with that.
Have you ever been asked for an interview by the ABC?
Only on business.
Okay. All right.
I don't think they want to hear my opinions.
No, well, that's the problem, isn't it? They only want to hear the opinions of those that they agree with.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, we've come up to time. We've been speaking with Joseph Gutnik. Joseph, look, it's been wonderful to speak with you and hear your views. You've been a terrific shaliach for the Rebbe and a great advocate for the Jewish people. And we wish you all the success with everything that you do. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you very much for inviting me. Okay, just before we go, the L'chaim program with Morris Klein is on right now. That's on 3ZZZ. It's FM 92.3 or at 3ZZZ.com.au. That's all we have for tonight. Don't forget, next week we're speaking with James Patterson on security issues for Australia and the world. And you can keep up to date with what the AJA is talking about on our Facebook page. So please like it and share it widely. But for now, we wish you all a very good evening and look forward to seeing you again next week as usual. So from me, it's good night to you all. Bye for now. Good night.